I never thought I'd look at my own parents and feel nothing but absolute disgust. But when you watch the people who raised you abandon a confused, crying 78-year-old woman at an international airport terminal, just so they can rush off and liquidate her life's work, something inside you breaks permanently. They left my grandmother sitting on a cold plastic bench with nothing but a single battered suitcase and a one-way ticket to a country she hadn't visited in 30 years, all while they practically sprinted to the parking lot to drive straight to the closing meeting for her farm. They thought they had covered their tracks, thought they could blame her cognitive decline and claim she just got lost. But they didn't realize I was tracking their every move, and they certainly didn't expect what happened when we finally ended up in front of a judge. Was I wrong for turning my own family's lives completely upside down? Or would you have done the exact same thing to protect someone who couldn't protect themselves? To understand how my parents could do something so incredibly heartless, you have to understand who my grandmother, Nana Alina, is and what that farm meant to our family. My grandfather bought that 50-acre piece of land back in the late 70s with money he saved from working double shifts at a steel mill. It wasn't a massive corporate operation, just a beautiful, sprawling slice of countryside with an apple orchard, a few horse pastures, and a farmhouse that my grandfather built with his own 2 hands. When he passed away 10 years ago, Nana Alina refused to sell it. She stayed there, tending to the garden, hosting Sunday dinners, and keeping his memory alive in every creaking floorboard of that house. I spent every summer of my childhood on that farm, learning how to drive a tractor, picking fresh berries, and listening to Nana tell stories about the old country. She was the anchor of our family, the kindest, most selfless woman you could ever meet. My parents, Mark and Susan, were a completely different story. For as long as I can remember, they lived far beyond their means. They bought a house they couldn't afford, drove luxury cars they leased on high-interest debt, and constantly chased get-rich-quick schemes that invariably failed. My dad always viewed himself as a brilliant businessman who just hadn't caught his big break yet, while my mom was obsessed with maintaining the appearance of wealth to her country club friends. By the time I graduated from college and got my own apartment an hour away, their financial house of cards was completely collapsing. They were facing foreclosure, their credit cards were maxed out, and they were desperate. That was exactly when Nana Alina started showing early signs of dementia. It started small, like forgetting where she put her glasses or repeating the same story twice in an hour, but within a year, she needed help managing her day-to-day routine. Instead of stepping up to care for her out of love, my parents saw Nana's declining health as a golden business opportunity. They convinced her to move into their guest room, claiming it was for her safety, and immediately volunteered to handle her finances. I was naive back then. I thought they were finally doing something decent. But a few months after Nana moved in, I went to visit her and noticed she seemed incredibly anxious. She pulled me aside into the hallway, her hands trembling, and whispered that Mark and Susan kept asking her to sign papers she didn't understand. She told me they were talking about selling her farm to a major residential developer who wanted to bulldoze the orchard and build a massive subdivision. Nana was heartbroken, weeping as she told me she promised my grandfather she would never let the land leave the family. I immediately confronted my dad in the kitchen. He laughed it off, telling me I was being dramatic and that Nana was just paranoid because of her condition. He claimed the papers were just standard medical power of attorney documents so they could take her to the doctor. I wanted to believe him, but my gut told me he was lying. Over the next few weeks, I started doing some digging. I found out that my parents had secretly hired a shady lawyer to declare Nana mentally incompetent so they could execute a durable power of attorney, giving them full control over her estate. Even worse, they had already entered into a contingent sales agreement with the developer for a staggering $3 million. The only catch was that the developer required the title to be entirely cleared and signed over by the end of the month, and Nana was stubbornly refusing to sign the final voluntary transfer deed whenever she had moments of total clarity. That was when my parents devised their most sinister plan. They told Nana that she was going on a lovely vacation to visit her surviving sister in Italy, a trip she had dreamed about for years. They told her they would take her to the airport, help her through security, and that I would meet her on the other side after flying out a day early. In reality, they had bought her a one-way ticket, arranged no assistance, and had absolutely no intention of ensuring she safely boarded the flight or arrived at her destination. They just wanted her out of the state, isolated and confused, so they could claim an emergency forced them to sign the final property closing documents on her behalf using the disputed power of attorney. They figured by the time anyone realized what happened, the farm would be sold, the money would be in their accounts, and Nana would be thousands of miles away, unable to fight back. They didn't tell me about this trip until 24 hours before the flight, claiming it was a last-minute surprise for Nana. I immediately felt sick to my stomach. I knew they were up to something terrible because the closing date for the farm sale was scheduled for the exact same afternoon as her flight. I pretended to play along, telling them I was thrilled for Nana and that I would meet them at the airport to say goodbye. But instead of just showing up, I arrived 2 hours early and hid near the International Departures Terminal, watching the entrance like a hawk. Sure enough, I saw my parents' SUV pull up to the curb. My dad helped Nana out of the car, handed her a single suitcase, and led her into the terminal. My mom didn't even get out of the vehicle. I watched from behind a massive concrete pillar as my dad walked Nana to a seating area near the check-in desks. He didn't check her luggage, he didn't walk her to the security line, and he didn't wait for her flight to be called. He literally handed her a boarding pass, patted her on the shoulder, turned around, and walked away. I saw Nana look around, her face twisting into pure panic and confusion as she realized she was entirely alone in a sea of strangers. She started crying, clutching her purse to her chest. My dad didn't even look back. He was practically jogging out of the terminal, pulling out his phone to make a call, undoubtedly to the developer's lawyers to tell them the coast was clear. So that's the absolute nightmare of a situation I was dealing with, watching my own parents abandon my terrified grandmother just to secure a payday. I had a choice to make right then and there. Do I immediately run after my dad and cause a massive scene, or do I play the long game to make sure they get exactly what they deserve? Before I tell you the absolute chaos that happened next, I want you to pause right now and comment below what you would have done if you saw your own parents do something that heartless. The second my dad cleared the sliding glass doors, I ran straight to Nana. When she saw me, she sobbed so hard she could barely breathe, throwing her arms around my neck and begging me not to leave her. I comforted her, got her a bottle of water, and immediately canceled the flight. I called a close friend of mine who is an absolute shark of an elder law attorney, explaining the entire situation in a frantic, whispered phone call. He told me exactly what we needed to do. I took Nana straight to his office, where he helped us document her physical and mental state, took her detailed statement on video, and filed an emergency petition for an injunction to freeze all transactions related to her estate, alleging elder abuse, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. While we were doing this, my parents were at the developer's corporate office, signing the paperwork to sell the farm and eagerly waiting for the wire transfer to hit their bank account. They thought they had won. They thought Nana was somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, completely out of the picture. They didn't find out until the next morning that the title company had halted the funds transfer because of our emergency court filing. When my dad called me, screaming and cursing, demanding to know where his mother was and accusing me of ruining his life, I just told him, "I'll see you in court on Thursday." The day of the hearing arrived, and my parents walked into the courtroom looking incredibly smug. They had hired an expensive lawyer and clearly thought they could just paint me as a disgruntled, meddling kid and Nana as a senile old woman who didn't know what she wanted. Their lawyer stood up and argued aggressively, claiming my parents had full legal power of attorney, that the farm sale was necessary to fund Nana's ongoing medical care, and that they had merely dropped her off at the airport for a pre-planned vacation where she was supposed to be met by flight attendants. They painted themselves as saintly, exhausted caretakers who were just doing their best. Then it was our turn. My attorney didn't just present arguments, he presented absolute receipts. He submitted the airport surveillance footage we had legally subpoenaed, which showed my dad abandoning Nana on that bench and sprinting out of the building. He presented the flight logs showing no special assistance was ever requested, and the financial records proving my parents were using Nana's bank accounts to pay off their own personal credit cards and car leases. Finally, Nana herself took the stand. With incredible bravery and a sudden, sharp clarity that cut through the entire room, she looked directly at the judge and explained how her own children had lied to her, intimidated her, and tried to throw her away just to steal the land her husband had bled for. The judge, a notoriously stern woman, listened intently, her face growing darker and darker with every piece of evidence presented. When our attorney finished, the judge looked over at my parents, who were suddenly looking very pale and sweaty. Then, the judge spoke, and her words echoed through the silent courtroom. She looked at my parents with pure, unadulterated disgust and said, "In my 25 years on the bench, I have rarely witnessed an act of greed so utterly devoid of human decency. You did not care for this woman. You predated upon her. You abandoned her like a piece of unwanted luggage in a crowded terminal, showing less compassion than one would show to a stray animal, all to line your own pockets." The judge didn't just grant our injunction. She completely stripped my parents of their power of attorney and appointed me as Nana's sole legal guardian and conservator. She invalidated the sale of the farm, ruling it fraudulent, and ordered a full forensic audit of Nana's finances, stating she would personally refer the case to the district attorney's office for criminal charges regarding elder financial exploitation and neglect. My mom burst into tears, hysterical, while my dad just stared at the table, completely broken. The aftermath was swift and devastating for them. The developer backed out entirely, suing my parents to recover their initial deposit and legal fees. The district attorney followed through on the judge's recommendation, charging both of them with felony elder abuse and grand theft. To avoid a lengthy prison sentence, they ended up taking a plea deal that required full restitution of every single dollar they stole from Nana's savings, along with 5 years of intensive probation and hundreds of hours of community service. They lost their expensive cars, their house went into foreclosure anyway, and their reputation in the community was completely destroyed. They haven't spoken to me since that day in court, and honestly, that is the greatest gift they could have ever given me. As for Nana Alina, she moved back into her beloved farmhouse, and I moved in with her to make sure she has the proper, loving care she actually deserves. With the developers gone, the orchard is thriving, and we spend our afternoons sitting on the porch, drinking tea and looking out over the land. Her memory still fades from time to time, but she knows exactly where she is. She knows she is safe, and she knows she is home. This whole nightmare taught me that family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by loyalty, love, and doing the right thing even when it's the hardest choice you'll ever make. If you think I did the right thing by standing up for my grandmother and putting my parents behind bars, please hit that like button right now. Subscribe to the channel for more crazy, real-life stories just like this one, and make sure to share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. I'll see you all in the next story.